continuation from the author of the book The Inner Meaning of the Last Temptation of Christ. We are grateful and deeply appreciative to our Lord God Jesus Christ for this novel and film, to Nikos Kazantzakis, the author of the novel The Last Temptation of Christ, for this great work of his, to Martin Scorsese, the greatest director of all times and peoples, for this great film of his, which humanity has not yet fully realized. What a great message this film conveys and reveals to humanity. Their works help us understand the state and aspirations of Israel during the earthly life of Jesus Christ, the inner world of Jesus Christ and his great message to humanity. This novel and film constantly provide us with hope, comfort and encouragement, and always help us in difficult situations to cope with fear, doubt and despair. This novel and film can be called a practical guide to the building of the New Jerusalem as the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven, about which the Lord commanded us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, Our Father, Matthew 6:9-10, the building of which Emanuel Swedenborg describes in his books. This novel and film are incomprehensible to many, and many are stumped by their seeming inconsistency with the letter of the word. However, the word has an inner meaning, which is called the spirit of the word. Jesus Christ taught about the spirit of the word and revealed its inner meaning. Emanuel Swedenborg writes in his books about the spirit of the word that the Lord revealed to him. Therefore, we decided, based on the books of Emanuel Swedenborg, to describe our understanding of the inner meaning of this novel and film in order to make them more understandable and reveal the thoughts of their authors. Chapter 1. Comments. Inner meaning. Here the author describes the night life of one of the Israel villages and the dreams of its inhabitants, and invites us to immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of Israel life during the time when Jesus worked as a carpenter. We are invited to feel the possible thoughts of Jesus and compare them with our thoughts and identify ourselves with condition of Jesus and the condition of the Israelites at that time. Chapter 1. The Last Temptation of Christ novel. A cool, heavenly breeze took possession of him. Above, the blossoming skies had opened into a thick tangle of stars. Below, on the ground, the stones were steaming, still afire from the great heat of the day. Heaven and earth were peaceful and sweet, filled with the deep silence of angels, night voices, more silent than silence itself. It was dark, probably midnight. God's eyes, the sun and the moon were closed and sleeping, and the young man, his mind carried away by the gentle breeze, meditated happily. But as he thought, what solitude, what paradise! Suddenly the wind changed and thickened. It was no longer a heavenly breeze, but the reek of heavy greasy breaths, as though in some overgrown thicket or damp luxuriant orchard below him. A gasping animal or a village was struggling in vain to sleep. The air had become dense, restless. The air had become dense, restless. The tepid breaths of men, animals, and elves rose and mixed with a sharp odor from sour human sweat, bread freshly removed from the oven. And the laurel oil used by the women to anoint their hair. You sniffed, you sensed, you divined, but saw nothing. Little by little, your eyes became accustomed to the darkness, and you were able to distinguish a stern, straight-trunked cypress, darker than night itself, a clump of date palms, grouped like a fountain, and rustling in the wind, sparsely leafed olive trees which shone silver in the blackness. And there on a green spot of land you saw wretched cottages thrown down now in groups, now singly constructed of night, mud and brick, and smeared all over with whitewash. You realized from the smell and filth that human forms, some covered with white sheets, others uncovered, were sleeping on the rooftops. The silence had fled, the blissful, inhabited night filled with anguish. Human hands and feet twisted and turned, unable to find repose. Human hearts sighed. Despairing, obstinate cries from hundreds of mouths fought in this mute, God-trodden chaos to unite, toiled to find expression for what they longed to say, but they could not, and the cries scattered and were lost in disjointed ravings. Suddenly there was a shrill, heart-rending scream from the highest rooftop, in the center of the village. A human breast was tearing itself in two. God of Israel, God of Israel, Adonai, how long? It was not a man, it was the whole village dreaming and shouting together. The whole soil of Israel, with the bones of its dead and the roots of its trees, the soil of Israel, in labor, unable to give birth, and screaming. After a long silence, the cry suddenly tore the air again from earth to heaven, but now with even more anger and grievance. How long? How long? The village dogs awoke and began to bark. And on the flat mud roofs, the frightened women thrust their heads under the armpits of their husbands. The youth was dreaming. He heard the shout in his sleep and stirred. He heard the shout in his sleep and stirred. The dream took fright, began to flee. The mountain ratified and its insides appeared. It was not made of rock, but of sleep and dizziness. The group of huge wild men who were stamping furiously up it with giant strides, all mustaches, beards, eyebrows, and great long hands. They, rarefied, also lengthened, widened, were completely transformed and then plucked into tiny threads like clouds scattered by a strong wind. A little more and they would have disappeared from the sleeper's mind. But before this could happen, his head grew heavy and he fell once more into a deep sleep. The mountain thickened again into rock. The clouds solidified into flesh and bone. He heard someone panting, then hurried steps, and the red beard reappeared at the mountain's peak. His shirt was open, he was barefooted, red-faced, sweating. His numerous Haspin followers were behind him, still hidden among the rough stones of the mountain. Above the dome of heaven once again formed a well-built roof, but now there was only a single star, large like a mouthful of fire, hanging in the east. Day was breaking. The young man lay stretched on his bed of wood shavings, breathing deeply, resting after the hard work of the day. His eyelids flew up for an instant as though struck by the morning star, but he did not awake. He dreamed. The dreamed had again skillfully wrapped itself around him. He dreamed that the red beard stopped. Sweat streamed from his armpits, legs, and narrow, deeply wrinkled forehead. Steaming at the mouth from exertion and anger, he started to swear, but restrained himself, swallowed the curse, and merely grumbled dejectedly, "How long, Adonai, how long?" But his rage did not abate. He turned around. Fast as lightning, the long march unrolled itself within him. Mountains sank away, men vanished. The dream was wrenched into a new locale, and the sleeper saw the land of Canaan unfold above him on the low cane-lathed ceiling of his house. The land of Canaan, like embroidered air, many-colored, richly ornamented, and trembling. To the south, the quivering desert of Idumea shifted like the back of a leopard. Further on, the Dead Sea, thick and poisonous, drowned and drank the light. Beyond this stood inhuman Jerusalem, moated on every side by the commandments of Jehovah. Blood from God's victims, from lambs and prophets, ran down its cobbled streets. Next came Samaria, dirty, trodden by idolaters, with a well in the center, and rouged and powdered woman drawing water. And finally, at the extreme north, Galilee, sunny, modest, verdant. Sunny, modest, verdant. And flowing from one end of the dream to the other was the river Jordan, God's royal artery, which passes by sandy wastes and rich orchards. John the Baptist and Samaritan heretics, prostitutes, and the fishermen of Gennesaret, watering them all indifferently. The young man exalted in his sleep to see the holy water and soil. He stretched forth his hand to touch them, but the promised land, made up of dew, wind, and age-old human desires, and illuminated like a rose by the dawn, suddenly flickered in the fluffy darkness and was snuffed out. And as it vanished, he heard curses and bellowing voices and saw the numerous band of men reappear from behind the sharp rocks, and the prickly pears, but completely changed now and recognizable. How crumpled and shriveled the giants had become, how stunted. They were panting dwarfs, imps, gasping for breath, and their beards dragged along the ground. Each carried a strange implement of torture. Some held bloody leather belts studded with iron. Some clasped knives and ox goads. Some thick, wide-headed nails. 3 midgets whose behinds nearly scraped the ground carried a massive unwieldy cross. And last of all came the vilest of the lot, a cross-eyed pygmy holding a crown of thorns. The Redbeard leaned over, gazed at them, and shook his large boned head with disdain. The sleeper heard his thoughts. They don't believe. That's why they degenerated. That's why I am being tormented. That's why I am being tormented. They don't believe. He extended his immense, hairy hand. Look, he said, pointing to the plain below, which was drowned in morning hoar frost. We don't see anything, Captain. It's dark. You don't see anything? Why? Then don't you believe? We do, Captain. We do. That's why we follow you, but we don't see anything. Look again. Lowering his hand like a sword, he pierced the hoar frost and uncovered the plain beneath. A blue lake was awakening. It smiled and glittering as it pushed aside its blanket of frost. Great nestfuls of eggs, villages and hamlets gleamed brilliantly white under the date palms all around its pebbly shores and in the middle of the fields of grain. He's there, said the leader, pointing to a large village surrounded by green meadows. The tree The three windmills which overlooked it had opened their wings in the early dawn and were turning. Terror suddenly poured over the sleeper's dark, wheat-complexioned face. The dream had settled on his eyelids and was brooding there. Brushing his hand over his eyes to be rid of it, he tried as hard as he could to wake up. It's a dream, he thought. I must awake and save myself. But the tiny man revolved about him obstinately and did not wish to leave. The savage-faced Redbeard was now speaking to them, shaking his finger menacingly at the large village in the plain below. He's there. He lives there in hiding, barefooted, dressed in rags, playing the carpenter, pretending he's not the one. He's not the one. He wants to save himself, but how can he escape us? God's eyes have seen him. After him, lads. He raised his foot and got on his mark, but the dwarfs clung to his arms and legs. He lowered his foot again. There are many people dressed in rags, Captain. Many who go barefooted, many carpenters. Give us a clue who he is, what he looks like, and where he lives, so that we'll be able to recognize him. Otherwise, we are not budging. You'd better know that, Captain. We are not budging. We are tired out. I shall hug him to my bosom and kiss him. That will be your clue. Forward now, run, but quiet, don't shout. Right now he is sleeping. Take care he doesn't wake up and escape us. In God's name, lads, after him. After him, Captain, shouted the dwarfs in unison, and they raised their big feet, ready to start. But one of them, the skinny, cross-eyed hunchback who held the crown of thorns, clutched a prickly shrub and resisted. I'm not going anywhere, he screamed. I'm fed up. How many nights have we been hunting him? How many countries and villages have we tramped through? Count. In the desert of Idumea, we searched the monasteries of the Essenes, one after the other. We went through Bethany, where we practically murdered poor Lazarus, to no avail. We reached the Jordan, but the Baptist sent us away, saying, I am not the one you seek, so be off with you. We left and entered Jerusalem, searched the temple, the palaces of Annas and Caiaphas, the cottages of the scribes and Pharisees. No one but scoundrels, liars, robbers, prostitutes, murderers. We left again. We raced through Samaria. We excommunicate and reached Galilee. In one lump we took in Magdala, Cana, Capernaum, Bethsaida, from Bud to Hat, Kaik to Kaik. We searched for the most virtuous, the most God-fearing. Every time we found him, we cried, "You are the one, why are you hiding? Arise and save Israel." But as soon as he saw the tools we carried, his blood ran cold. He kicked, stamped, shrieked, "It's not me, not me," and threw himself into a life of wine, gambling, and women in order to save himself. He became drunk, he blasphemed, he whored, just to make us see he was a sinner and not the one we sought. "I'm sorry, Captain, but we'll meet up with the same thing here. We're chasing him in vain. We won't find him. He still has not been born." The Redbeard grabbed him by the nape of the neck and held him dangling in the air for a long moment. "Doubting Thomas," he said, laughing. "Doubting Thomas, I like you." He turned to the others. "He is the ox god. We, the laboring beasts. Let him prick us so that we may never find peace." Hairless Thomas screeched with pain. The Redbeard set him down on the ground. Laughing again, he swept his eyes over the heterogeneous company. "How many are we?" he asked. 12, one from each of the tribes of Israel. Devils, angels, imps, dwarfs, all the birds and abortions of God. Take your pick. He was in a good mood. His round, hawk-like eyes flashed. Stretching out his great hand, he began to grip the companions angrily, tenderly, by the shoulder. One by one, he held them dangling in the air while he examined them from top to bottom, laughing. As soon as he released one, he grabbed another. "Hello, skinflint, venom nose, prophet-mad, immortal son of Abraham. And you, daredevil, chatterbox, gobble jaws. And you, pious milk toast, you don't murder, steal or commit adultery, because you are afraid. All your virtues are daughters of fear, and you simple donkey that they break with beating. You carry on despite hunger, thirst, cold, and the whip. Laborers, careless of your self-respect, you lick the bottom of the saucepan. You lick the bottom of the saucepan. All your virtues are daughters of poverty. And you, sly fox, you stand outside the den of the lion, the den of Jehovah, and do not go in. And do not go in. And you, knave sheep, you bleat and follow a goat who is going to eat you. And you, son of Levi, quack, goat peddler who sells the Lord by the ounce, innkeeper who stands man God as a drink so that they will become tipsy and open their purses to you and their hearts, you rascal of rascals. And you, malicious, fanatical, headstrong ascetic, you look at your own face and manufacture a god who is malicious, fanatical, and headstrong. Then you prostrate yourself and worship him because he resembles you, and you whose immortal soul opened a money-changing shop. You sit on the threshold, plunge your hand into the sack, give alms to the poor, lend to God. You keep a ledger and write, I gave so many florins for charity to so and so on such and such a day at such and such an hour. You leave instructions for the ledger to be put in your coffin so that you will be able to open it in front of God. Present your bill and collect the immortal millions. And you liar, teller of tall tales, you trample all the Lord's commandments underfoot. You murder, steal, commit adultery, and afterward break into tears, beat your breast, take down your guitar, and turn the sin into a song. Shrewd devil, you know very well that God pardons singers, no matter what they do, because he can simply die for a song. And you, Thomas, sharp-ox God in our ramps. And me, crazy, irresponsible fool, I got a swelled head and left my wife and children in order to search for the Messiah. all of us together, devils, angels, imps, dwarfs, we are all needed in our great cause. After him, lads. He laughed, spit into his palms, and moved his big feet. After him, lads, he shouted again, and he started at a run down the slope leading to Nazareth. Mountains and men became smoke and disappeared. The sleeper's eyes filled with dreamless murk. Now, at last, he heard nothing in his endless sleep but huge heavy feet stamping on the mountain and descending. His heart pounded wildly. He heard a piercing cry deep within his bowels. "They're coming! They're coming!" Jumping up with a start, so it seemed to him in his sleep, he blockaded the door with his workbench and piled all his tools on top: his saws, jack, and block planes, adzes, hammers, screwdrivers, and also a massive cross which he was working on at the time. Then he sheathed himself again in his wood shavings and chips to wait. There was a strange, disquieting calm, thick, suffocating. He heard nothing, not even the villagers breathing, much less gods. Everything, even the vigilant devil, had sunk into a dark, fathomless, dried up well. Was this sleep or death, immortality, God? The young man became terrified, saw the danger, tried with all his might to reach his drowning mind, to save himself, and woke up. He was soaked in sweat. He remembered nothing from the dream, only this: someone was hunting him. Who? One, many, men, devils? He could not recall. He cocked his ear and listened. The village's respiration could be heard now in the quiet of the night, the breathing of many breasts, many souls. A dog barked mournfully from time to time. A tree rustled in the wind. A mother at the edge of the village lulled her child to sleep slowly, movingly. The night filled with murmurs and sighs which he knew and loved. The earth was speaking, God was speaking, and the young man grew calm. For a moment he had feared. He remained all alone in the world. For a moment he had feared. He remained all alone in the world. He heard his old father's gasps from the room where his parents slept, which was next to his own. The unfortunate man could not sleep. He was contorting his mouth and laboriously opening and closing his lips in an effort to speak. For years he had been tormenting himself in this way, struggling to emit a human sound, but he sat paralyzed on his bed, unable to control his tongue. He toiled, sweated, dribbled at the mouth, and now and then, after a terrible contest, he managed to put together one word by voicing each syllable separately, desperately, one word, one only, always the same. Adonai, Adonai. Nothing else, only Adonai. And when he finished this entire word, he would remain tranquil for an hour or two until the struggle again gripped him, and he began once more to open and close his mouth. "It's my fault, murmured the young man, his eyes filling with tears. In the silence of the night, the son heard his father's anguish, and he too, overcome with anguish, began involuntarily to sweat and opened and closed his lips. Shutting his eyes, he listened to what his father did so that he could do the same. Together with the old man, he sighed, uttered desperate, inarticulate cries, and while doing this slept once more. But as soon as sleep came over him again, the house shook violently, the workbench toppled over, tools and cross rolled to the floor, the door opened, and the red beard towered on the threshold, immense, laughing wildly, his arms spread wide. The young man cried out and awoke. To be continued.